Monaco embodies everyone's glamorous view of what Formula One should be. Sport combining with a high-octane, exotic lifestyle. It's the driver's responsibility to try to live that dream to the full on our behalf. But in this day and age, not all of them can manage that. But our subject today is an honourable exception. Our legend of Formula One is Eddie Irvine. Eddie Irvine had a career full of incident and adventure. A Grand Prix driver with Jordan, Ferrari and Jaguar, he was on the podium 26 times, a race winner on 4 occasions. He prompted anger from Senna and support from Schumacher, and through a decade in Formula One was outspoken and controversial. And he remains very much his own man. After Formula One, he built a multi-million-pound property empire, including a private island in the Bahamas. He's been lucky in life and is enjoying every minute of it. Eddie, this is the life, and this is the life we tend to associate with you more than any other Grand Prix driver. How much time have you spent on boats like this in the last 30 years?
Oh, I live on boats. I have my boat that I bought years ago when I joined Ferrari. I have it in New York, so I live on New York and obviously down on the island. I'm always on boats going back and forward, and Monaco is the place to have a boat, you know. So it makes life easier. A boat, it's for convenience really more than anything. I think I'm basically lazy, and if you're on a boat in the harbour, you don't have to move too far. Everything kind of happens around you. So I think it's more laziness than having a great love of boats.
This image of you as the great party animal, the guy who loves everything that surrounds Formula One, is that genuine? Because you're also a chap who likes a bit of space and a bit of privacy as well.
I think I'm a yin and a yang. You know, I need the maximum of everything. You know, if I want to go to a party, I want to go to the best party, and I want it to last as long as it can last, and I love it. Like, I love sitting on a beach with no one else around, just watching a hummingbird, you know. So I think I need extremes. I'm extremist, and gets me in a lot of trouble sometimes, but hey, I think that's the way I'm made, and I just got to go along with it. And at the minute, you know, I'm based really in the Bahamas. I've got the island, which there's no one there a lot of the time, although I bring some friends down occasionally. And then I've got New York, which is the ultimate city that never sleeps. So, you know, I stay down the island for 2 weeks, and then when I need explosion, I go to New York and explode. And then obviously Monaco is the best weekend of the year anywhere in the world. This is just an amazing event. There's nothing like it in the world anywhere.
Yeah. So as a kid growing up in Northern Ireland and getting excited and inspired by motor racing, was it the image of the sport? Was it the action? Was it the lifestyle that came with it that attracted you? What inspired you most of all? Well,
I think one of the first memories I ever had was my father arriving back from Monaco, having gone down there with my uncle. I was probably like 5 at the time or something. And another great memory was when I just signed for Marlboro, and I'd done Formula 3 with them, and they sent me down here with James Hunt to watch the Grand Prix, and that was the year Senna did that race, 88, I think it was, where he was on pole by 1.5 seconds, and I was at the swimming pool, and I couldn't breathe as I seen Senna come in. It was just another level of speed that you just thought he wasn't going to make it. And that was one of the most amazing things I've ever seen in my life, if not probably the most amazing thing I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. And to be there that weekend was another amazing memory of here. And I always did well here. And Monaco is just super special. I don't like the way they're making it safer and safer. I loved it whenever if you screwed up, you hit something.
And that's how it was in the 60s and 70s. Your father was into historic racing, wasn't he?
Well, my dad raced, but listen, they had no money. It was him and his 2 brothers bought a racing car, and my dad was the only one small enough to fit in it. So he ended up being the driver, and my Uncle Tommy, my Uncle Jimmy, they were the mechanics. And it was good fun to go around the races, and I polished the car, and I thought that made it go faster and stuff like this. So it was in my blood, and my father likes to go out as well, so that was in my blood too. And the 2 things gelled together, and it made, I guess, Eddie Irvine, you know.
Yeah. And summer holidays, British Grand Prix, and
always that was our summer holiday. We'd leave Northern Ireland, and I loved it I loved Brands Hatch as a circuit, but I loved it when it was Silverstone, because to get to Brands Hatch was a pain because they didn't have the M25 back then. It was the the North Circular.
Yeah, north and south, yeah.
And that was a nightmare. And I used to hate that, but I loved once you got to Brands Hatch. And then of course my parents they'd buy a ticket, and then me and my sister Sonia would have to like find our own way in, which was normally under a fence or over a fence. I remember the police stopped us once digging a hole under the fence and says, listen, we're going to walk away. Don't be here when we come back. Of course, we dug faster. And we went and in, you know, it was great memories.
Yeah. So how did you actually start racing? Do you remember your first race? It was the obvious progression, Formula 4, Formula 3,
I don't even remember my first race. That's the weird thing. I don't remember the first time I drove. Like, I don't remember, it's weird, I don't remember the first time I drove a racing car, I don't remember my first race, and I don't remember the first time I drove a Ferrari.
Really?
Yeah, which is weird. Yeah. I don't know why. It wasn't that significant. I think I was more into performing than into the moment.
Yeah.
That's what I think I was never about. Yeah. It was for me, I had a job to do, and I wanted to do the job as best as I could.
Born in County Down in Northern Ireland, Eddie Irvine was a multiple champion in Formula Ford, making the progression into the British Formula 3 Championship in 1988. It was a difficult season in an underpowered car on a grid packed with names who would become very familiar in future Formula 1 campaigns.
Damon Hill wins, Gary Brabham takes second place.
But for Irvine, the world was opening up. There was Formula 3000 and also the growing opportunities to race in Japan. For the right driver and right package, sponsorship and support could be easily available.
You know, the world was booming, there was money around, and then the good drivers can find sponsorship, or there's good drives out there. And then after that, the recession hit. And then the next era of good drivers couldn't find free drives, so you know there was really good drivers around that never made it. You know, I know lots of guys that were as good as me, if not better, and they just wrong timing. I think you have to be good, you have to be persistent, so you're around when you get lucky. Damon was around a long time,
yeah,
and I think that's what it was about. And Donnelly was around a long time. It's about being good enough and persistent.
And around that time, in that championship, was that a time when obviously friendships were formed, but rivalries were formed as well, yourself and Damon and so on?
Well, I was never really friends with anyone, to be honest. I didn't really want to be friends with anyone. I kind of wanted to do my own thing. As soon as the race was over, I didn't want to mix with other drivers. In Japan, we did a little bit, you know, when I raced there because we were stuck there. But even then, I was kind of always doing my own thing, and I didn't really want to form relationships with guys I wanted to push off the circuit the next day.
Yeah, you sort of gave the impression, therefore, that you were a bit nonchalant and didn't really care about the race and didn't care about everything. I mean, that wasn't true because you were highly motivated at that time.
I didn't care about the other drivers. I really didn't, and I didn't care about anybody apart from myself. But I cared about the result that I did because that reflected on me, and that's all that was important. I was there to do a job. I was paid to do a job, and I had to do the job the best I could do that job, which is what I always do. Other than that, I really don't care. You know, which is a problem I have in business. It drives me nuts when I pay someone to do a job and they don't care. You know, it's a recurring problem I have in business. I expect them to be as committed as I was whenever I was racing.
There was a lot of talent around in the late 80s and early 90s, and Irvine was a front-running driver, but not a dominant one. The 3 years racing in Japan were to be a key stage in his development and would help provide the final step into Formula 1. Tell us about the Japan experience, because a lot of drivers go out there and their career sort of ends up in a cul-de-sac in racing in Japan. For you, it worked, and for what reason?
I think it worked because I was good enough to be in Formula 1. It worked for Mika Salo, worked for Frentzen because we were all good enough to be in Formula 1. But at the time, we just didn't have the money. We were 3 guys that didn't have the money. And we went there, we were like kind of in a holding pattern. You know, we went there, we made lots of money, we had a great time, we drove amazing cars, and we had fantastic teams, and they just threw money at the series like crazy. And money, when it's unlimited, is an amazing, it makes things amazing. It's like Formula 1, everyone's tight with money, they're trying to bring the cost down, so it's not as pure as it used to be. It's like, you know, to go to the moon, it was blank check, let's get this done, yes. And they did it, and it was amazing. So
the lifestyle in Japan, was it a bit of a routine, or you had a bit of fun over there?
Obviously I was dating Maria, the mother of my child, so I'd go to Macau a lot, But also there was Tokyo, which is a great city, you know. We had a lot of fun in Tokyo. And Ratzenberger, he was out there, so we all hung out and we had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Irvine would finish runner-up in the Japanese Formula 3000 Championship in 1993, but more importantly, he'd link up with Eddie Jordan and drive in that year's Japanese Grand Prix, and it would be one of the most sensational Formula One debuts the sport had ever seen. Eddie Irvine had made a strong impression driving in Formula 3000 in Europe and Japan. Part of that was with fellow Irishman Eddie Jordan, and he was the man who would give Irvine his Formula One debut with a drive in the 1993 Japanese Grand Prix. And what a debut it proved to be.
At the time I was racing for Toyota as well as Tsurumo, and I was considered to be the best or one of the best in Japan. And Toyota picked me to do Le Mans, and I was leading Le Mans quite easily, and we had problems with the car. But anyway, EJ came over to me and said, listen, we want to get rid of Boutsen. Would you be interested in driving? And I goes, of course. Well, I've no money. I had lots of money at the time, but I wasn't going to use my own money. And then he came back to me, and we talked about it. In the end, I signed up for the Japanese Grand Prix. Didn't particularly like the car, I have to say. But I remember coming in after the first free practice, and I'm like 6th or 7th, and everyone's in shock. I was looking for I remember looking from the bottom to find where I was, and I looked up, and of course I didn't go from like 10 up, so I went back down to the bottom again. And then I looked, and it was like Senna, and then, you know, me. It's something like, it was like 3 or 4 guys, and then me. I'm like, wow. And then I qualified 8th. That race, and then I went round the outside of 4 guys at the first 2 corners.
I said the first few hundred yards of your Formula One driving career. Tell us about what was going through your mind at that time?
I was laughing my head off. I thought it was hilarious because I knew I couldn't finish the race because the car was too small for me, so my back was killing. I couldn't do more than 10 laps. I'd never done more than 10 laps in the car. I just seen everyone go over to the right, and my whole plan was always to go round the outside anyway because I know it's doable because I'd raced there, so I just went, and I went around the outside of Hill, Schumacher. I was just, right, who's next? You know, I think I was 4th at the end of the first 3 corners or something like that. So I was having a laugh because I knew I couldn't finish. But then it rained, which saved me because the loading on my back wasn't so bad.
And then you decided to unlap yourself against.
Yeah, but you know, that was Damon's fault. Like it was completely Damon's fault, and I let Senna through twice, you know, and Damon wouldn't let him through. And in the end, I'm like, I have to overtake him to get the Damon, who was running in 4th or 5th. I can't remember exactly where we were, but I had to overtake Damon because I was racing Damon. He's in a Williams and I'm in a Jordan, so I had to get at him. So I overtook Senna, and then he overtook Hill, and then Hill overtook me, which he should have let Senna through, and he didn't. Yeah. So it was really Damon's fault. But Senna, we had an incident earlier on in the weekend where he blocked me. You know, because I'm obviously a new guy and I'm a nobody, and he's Ayrton Senna, which is fair enough. You know, so then I blocked him the next chance I had, and it kind of came from that. Yeah. It wasn't really. I don't think it was the Sunday that was the problem. It was I think it was the Friday or the Saturday.
Building up.
Yeah, I'm in there for me, and I don't care about anybody else, and that's the way you have to be.
And then after the race, what exactly happened?
Well, that's really boring. It was so well documented. He came down screaming at me, and I'm sitting on a chair with my arms folded, and I'm happy, you know, I just scored a point in my first Grand Prix. I think it was only 3 guys had done it. So I'm pretty happy. And I'm good at winding people up. And I wind them up very, very well, as I do. And eventually he sprung it, and he swung at me and he hit me in the head. But I was leaning back to get out of the way, and I fell off the table. So it wasn't like a knockout punch or anything, but he did hit me.
So there's your debut.
I know, it was embarrassing because it was all in the papers, you know, this new guy. And I remember sitting on the airplane because I left the next day to go back to Hong Kong. And I'm sitting on the airplane, and there's this guy reading the newspaper about this new Formula One driver and the fight. And I'm like, oh my God, I hope he doesn't recognize me. Then I arrive in Australia, and there's like cameras everywhere wanting to know who this new guy was.
Irvine's volatile reputation was further underlined when he crashed out of the Australian Grand Prix. But Jordan gave him a full-time drive for the 1994 season. And in the opening race in Brazil, he was involved in a massive pile-up.
Verstappen! Verstappen! Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!
The result was a one-race ban, which was increased to 3 when the team appealed the decision.
But I think they just thought I was too nonchalant, and they blamed me for an accident that totally was no. If it was anyone's fault, it was Verstappen's, because he could have lifted off. But I think he thought I was trying to block him because he was kind of blinded to what was going on. I'm coming up to overtake Eric Bernard, who is right behind Brundle when he loses the flywheel, so he lifts off. I just see him coming up me. I swerve left and miss him because I'm thinking, here's my opportunity to overtake him. Verstappen thinks I'm trying to block him because he's behind me, so he's pulling out, goes on the grass, loses it, comes across, and we have this multiple pile-up. And I got the blame for it because of Japan and whatever.
Because that was your reputation, you felt it?
Well, I think Ian Phillips said in his first Grand Prix, he had a fight. In his second Grand Prix, he crashed. In his third Grand Prix, he had a multiple pile-up. And in his fourth, fifth, and sixth, he was banned. So that was kind of my start in Formula One.
So how did life progress with Jordan after that? Things calmed down a bit, and
yeah,
it was a fun team to be in, wasn't it?
It was a fun team to be in, but you just seen there was no way they could. There was just no way. You know, you had the really mega operators like Ron Dennis, you know, and Frank Williams, and the reason EJ got to Formula One is because of the way he was, and the reason he ended up out of Formula One is because of the way he was, you know. So I think he did a fantastic job. He really achieved a lot. And he was great for the sport. But I think he probably got out a year or two too late for him. But Formula One kind of forgot about them guys in a way, you know. It got a bit too corporate and boring in a way. It got too big for its own boots in a way, and I think Formula One's lost a lot of its charm.
And that's affected the drivers as well. You don't get drivers who are quite as outspoken as you used to be, but
I don't know.
There's a lot more control there now, isn't there?
I don't know if that's true or not. I remember they used to say in my era, the guys before were like, and then the guys there, like the guys before them were, I think us older people don't know what the younger people are doing.
Probably right.
Because I remember them telling me stories that, you know, Berger used to do, and I'm like, oh, really? You know, the girls aren't with us, they must be with somebody else, you know?
Rubens Barrichello was Irvine's teammate at Jordan. Barrichello, the more experienced, but also the younger driver. It seemed an awkward partnership.
Rubens was very young, very childish, and very spoiled. He was a very, very talented driver, an amazing test driver, very, very great feel for the car. But, you know, he was meant to be the next Senna, and all of a sudden this Irish guy that no one really gave a damn about is starting to beat him. So it was all upside for me, and there was very little upside for him. If he beat me, so what? He's Rubens Barrichello, he should beat Irvine, and if I beat him, he's not that good. So it was the same with JJ Leto in a way. They had very little upside. Most people had very little upside if I beat them,
yes.
You know? So, and I generally beat I beat everyone except for Michael. If I look at my career, I beat all my teammates.
Everyone has a feeling about what happened at Imola in '94, and everyone has a different perspective on it. Of course, it affected Jordan with Rubens' big crash on the Friday, and then Roland killed on the Saturday, who you knew well from F3, from Japan as well. How did you come away from that weekend?
Oh, it was really sad. Like, Razzi was a good friend of mine, and I remember seeing him start that qualifying lap, and it was weird. I remember seeing him start that qualifying lap, and I didn't feel good. It was really, really, really weird. And then immediately the red flags came out. I just knew something was really bad, and I ran, and I watched the monitors, and obviously it wasn't good. You know, and it was a shame for him because he really loved being a racing driver. Like, it was his whole life to be a racing driver. He had worked really hard like I had. You know, we used to both sleep in the cars, like, and things like that. I remember I was even poorer than he was at the time. You know, he'd give me certain things, you know, to help me out. So it was really tough when he died because he had finally realized his dream, even though it was the Simtech, which was a joke. At least he had got in there.
He was in Formula One.
He could. From there, he could possibly have done something.
Yes.
But anyway, c'est la vie.
Did it change your attitude to the sport in any way, even subconsciously?
Listen, I was always scared. I never wanted to die in a racing car. Don't want to die, you know. I always thought this is dangerous, you know. You just had to get on with your job. That's the way I kept doing it. It's my job. I gotta get on with it, and hopefully I'm lucky. And I was. Like, if I look at, you know, through my career, there's a lot of guys got killed on the way up through that I knew. So I was very fortunate, and I never hurt myself once. Now maybe that's why I didn't drive fast enough. I don't know, to win the World Championship.
In his 2 full seasons with Jordan, Barrichello would always finish ahead of Irvine in the championship. But the Ulsterman was creating a more consistent impression. For '96, he got the call that most Grand Prix drivers dream of. Come and join Ferrari. He'd had a solid career in Formula 3000. He'd had a controversial 2 seasons with Jordan without ever seriously threatening a race win. So how in 1996 did Ulsterman Eddie Irvine find himself lining up alongside Michael Schumacher at Ferrari?
Marlboro had spoken to me and said, listen, why don't you speak to Jean Todt? And that year I was killing Rubens, the big teams, you know, and then there was me and Mika were fighting for the next couple of positions in qualifying. Mika would generally get me in the McLaren a little bit, but it was me and him. And I wanted out of Jordan. I knew there was no way that Eddie could ever really step up to the big guys. The gap was too big. It was impossible for him. So I needed to get out. I had a $5 million buyout clause, which was my problem. I was thinking, who's going to pay $5 million just to get me out? Yeah. But I went and met Jean Todt, and I says, listen, I'm supposed to get $1 million kickback from that. I don't want the money, so it's only $4 million. So they said, listen, okay, let's do it.
Did you go there with a sense of the heritage and the destiny that every driver...
For sure. I remember ringing my sister saying, I'm on my way to Geneva to sign for Ferrari. Her reaction actually made it sink in, you know?
But you knew the kind of role that you were going to be required to fit into, and...
Not really. Not really. Everyone says I was going there to be Schumacher's lackey, which was not the case. I signed a contract where I would follow team orders, but if I was faster than Michael, they would have said, let's go with Irvine, you know, that's always the case. The guy who's fastest gets the treatment. Michael was the fastest. He's always the fastest of all his teammates. He's killed every teammate he ever had. So, you know, I knew it was going to be tough because I'd seen the guy race. I'd followed him. I remember once in Macau, I followed him in his first year I'd ever seen him, and I came in to Dick Bennett. I said, geez, I don't know who that guy is, and the guy's sensational. So I knew it was going to be a tough gig, but the way I looked at it is, you know, I'd beaten every teammate I'd ever had, so let's see how I get on with Michael. In the first race, I qualified him, you know, and then we had such a bad car that it was a disaster. It really was. I remember when it came out, I said to Michael, this thing looks worryingly different from everybody else's car. And it was just a disaster. And, you know, that year, he did an amazing job to drive that thing because it was a piece of junk. It really was.
And Schumacher goes through, passes Jordan Lacey and moves up into 2nd place.
But what was the environment that he created at Ferrari? Did he have a sense of control?
He didn't create anything. He didn't, honestly, I think that's all completely made up. He was the best driver. Everybody knew he was the best driver. Jean Todt was the best manager. He put the best people around him. Like, Michael made so many really bad setup mistakes, it was incredible. Like, huge mistakes. But everybody knew he was the guy that would get the job done. If you give him the car, he'd get the job done. Even if you didn't give him the car, he'd still probably get the job done. And that's what he brought to the situation. Jean Todt brought this umbrella to keep the Italian media and Luca away from the team, to keep this little organisation calm. He brought Ross Brawn in, who was no genius, but he was like, he had his process and he stuck to that religiously, you know, and he brought Rory in. He's not Adrian Newey, but good enough to get a good enough car for Michael to win the championship, you know, and they got it done, but it was not like Michael brought to the team amazing confidence in it. He's the guy to get this job done.
Michael Schumacher has driven absolutely magnificently to underline enormously his World Championship status. And Michael Schumacher wins the Spanish Grand Prix after an absolutely superlative drive.
But from your point of view, he was the one who seemed to be doing most of the testing, most of the development.
That's why we screwed up.
Was that a frustration?
It was, because I think it was about a year later they realised Michael wasn't that good at setting up a car, because he didn't have to set up a car. He was so damn good. You know, he was very good at engine stuff. He was very good at, you know, mapping the engine and throttle response, things like that. He was very, very good at, but actually setting up a car, he was a disaster, in my opinion. You know, and that's where they did a very good move when they brought Rubens in. After, you know, I left in the M99, they brought Rubens in, who was a very good test driver. So it covered that weakness that Michael had. It was a myth. And you've seen it at Mercedes. He didn't make the impact at Mercedes.
But at the same time, as a driver, those first 2 years for you at Ferrari, what were you learning from him as a driver?
Just how quick he was. That's it.
You learned nothing in terms of technique or smoothness or...
No, he just had an innate ability to drive a racing car very, very fast. The 96 car was a disaster and was nearly undrivable, and only someone of Michael Schumacher's ability, and maybe Senna, could have driven it.
Yeah.
In 97, the car got better, so I moved closer. In 98, the car got better, and I got closer. In 99, the car got better, and I got within 2/10 of him in qualifying. And then, you know, because they started understanding pitch sensitivity, because the 96 car was insanely pitch sensitive. You couldn't, Michael could drive a car every millimeter. I wouldn't drive it every meter, you know? And as the cars became less pitch sensitive and more predictable, you didn't need to drive it every millimeter. And he lost his big advantage. You know, if it was, you know, a wheelbar race with a Formula 1 engine in the back, Michael Schumacher would win it by a mile. You know, that's kind of the ability he had. So it was, the cars were getting easier to drive. The engineers, I think, were understanding yaw sensitivity and pitch sensitivity and steering sensitivity, and they were starting to understand what the drivers could live with, what normal drivers could live with, and Michael wasn't a normal driver.
Yeah.
In 1999, many people were tipping Michael Schumacher to bring Ferrari their first driver's crown for 20 years.
That's Schumacher, isn't it?
Instead, when Schumacher broke his leg at the British Grand Prix, it became Eddie Irvine's first and only chance of the title. He'd already shown what might be possible by claiming his first Grand Prix victory in the opening race of that season in Australia.
It's going to be mighty, mighty close, but Eddie Irvine in the Ferrari just wins the Australian
Keep going, Eddie, the
Grand
line's
Prix.
there, that's it, well done.
Fabulous. Up goes the visor, out comes the fist. Oh, well done, Eddie Irvine. Yes, you've done it.
What was the feeling for finally nailing down that first Grand Prix win in Australia, though? That must
It
have been...
wasn't good, because I think Sterling Moss said, I'd rather lose a race driving fast enough to win it than win a race driving slow enough to lose it.
It was a bit like that.
And we weren't quick. You know, I seen that we weren't quick. You know, we were well off. The McLarens were a lot faster than we were.
Yeah. But within Ferrari, it's been said a number of times, I know, there was a feeling, we haven't won the World Championship for, what, 20 years at this point, and everything is geared up towards Michael taking the World Championship. When you got that first win in Australia, was there then a thought in your mind, actually, if I can bolt on another couple of wins, it could be my year?
No, because we were way too slow. The McLarens were in another race.
Yeah.
So I didn't think that at all. I made mistakes, Mika made mistakes, my team made mistakes, McLaren made mistakes, everybody made mistakes. We didn't have the car quick enough. Mika definitely had the faster package. I had a more reliable package, and I was making less mistakes than he was, but you know, it was the hare trying to beat the tortoise, and we were the tortoise, and we nearly beat the hare, but you know.
Yeah.
Now he's crying his eyes out in amongst the trees. Hakkinen absolutely distraught.
You know, what lost us really the championship was whenever Michael crashed, the 99 car came out of the wind tunnel, and they started developing the 2000 car. That's what really cost. That's why our performance just gradually went down and down and down until, because we'd been a little bit lucky, we'd done a good job, Mika had made a few mistakes, we actually went into the last few races with a chance. They thought, Jesus, we better make an effort here. and they took some of the things they found in the 2000 wind tunnel model, they put on the 99 car.
But that also seems to suggest that we're a team in business to win the World Championship for Ferrari and Michael Schumacher, not Eddie
No,
Irvine.
they were in the business of winning the World Championship, and Michael was their only bet to win the World Championship, really, because McLaren with Newey had a far faster car, and Michael Schumacher could make the difference.
Yeah.
I nearly could, but I couldn't quite. Michael was, you know, if I had been Jean Todt, I would have done exactly the same thing. That's why I'm not off about it.
Yeah.
Because I would have made that as a logical business person. That's the decision I would have made.
Really?
Yeah, because it's the sooner you put the 2000 car in the wind tunnel, the better it's going to be,
Yeah.
and it's that simple.
Yeah. So 99 Silverstone British Grand Prix, clear up for us with the benefit of hindsight what happened between you and Michael, and of course it resulted in broken leg for Michael, changed the season.
Well, Michael was not, he's got very slow reaction time, believe it or not. Everyone thinks racing drivers should have fast reaction times. Michael's is insanely slow for some bizarre reason, and starts. I was always really good at starts. In all my career, I would always do really good starts. That was one of the things I didn't like whenever there was the launch control, because one of my big advantages was I was really good at clutch control and figuring out how to fiddle all that stuff to get a good start. Anyway, and I'd normally qualify close to Michael, and then I could overtake him. And, you know, a lot of times I just let him through without being asked, because there was no point. I knew he was quicker than me. I'd just like, get on with it, let me do my race. Because I had other people to beat. I wasn't going to be beating him, so it was fine. But Michael, I think Michael said that I never let him through or something, which was, I had let him through, I just hadn't been ordered to let him through. So I thought, okay, from now on, I won't let him through until I get the order. And that, I made a quite deliberate decision before Silverstone, that's what I was going to do. So, of course, I beat him at the start, and I got ahead of him, and then coming down to Stowe, he went to the inside, and I was far enough ahead of him where it was going to be nearly impossible for him to overtake me, so I just stayed way left, and I left my braking at the very last minute, and Michael tried to outbrake me, and he locked up the fronts, I think it was, and then he came off the brake to unlock the fronts, and then he hit the brake again, at which point I think a rear nipple broke or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. I think a rear nipple broke, and he lost his rear brakes, and boom, he went straight in. Anyway, so that gave me the chance really to go for the championship. I was only 5 points behind Michael going into that race, so I was right up there, which was good. And of course, we started to lose speed, which it makes sense, you know, that we stopped developing the car, and we never made progress. And you'll see, we just gradually went back.
Whatever the commitment from Ferrari, it was Irvine's big chance. Mika Salo came into the team until Schumacher returned for the Malaysian Grand Prix. Meantime, Irvine set off in pursuit of the title.
Eddie Irvine.
She went on to Austria, and there were a couple of
Austria I won only because
wins
DC,
straight off the back, yeah.
Yeah, only because DC took Hakkinen out.
It's Coulthard coming from a long way back and just touches the back of Hakkinen.
Hakkinen was like a second a lap faster in that race than we were. DC kindly removed him from the race.
But it must have given you a growing thought, well, actually this could be on. More than it, because you were leading the championship.
Yeah, listen, I was sure I could win it after Malaysia because we had been quick enough there to win the race fair and square, although Michael gave me the race, but Ferrari, we were comparable to McLaren on speed. And then we lost our floor for Japan, and the speed just wasn't there. Yeah. You know, we had a floor that we used for a couple of races, and we did very well, and then we lost that floor. And
when you say you lost that floor, it was
a good floor.
It was a good floor, and you lost it.
And we lost it, and then we didn't go very quick, you know.
Yeah.
It seemed that the title had gone when the Ferraris were disqualified from first and second in the Malaysian Grand Prix for barge boards measuring 10 millimetres too much. It was McLaren who protested. Ferrari's appeal involved arguments about the flexing of the floor of the car. The appeal was upheld. Changes were made for the title showdown in Japan, but it all overshadowed what Irvine regards as a sensational return to action by Schumacher.
It was amazing. Like, I remember me and Mika Salo were testing at Mugello, which is one of the hardest circuits in the world. And he hadn't driven for, I don't know how many months it was. He got in the car on his second lap. He was like a tenth or 2/10 slower than I was, and I just like, how do you do that? And then of course by a couple of laps later, he's half a second quicker, and I'm like, it's impossible. You know, it's really, really annoying, but it's amazing. It was, it was an honor to be able to see his telemetry and see the things he could do with a car. It was, it was amazing. Like at Spa, going through Eau Rouge, full fuel, flat. And I never took a flat, you know? And he did it flat on his first lap with full fuel, and you're just like, it's not possible that he could do it. He's just an amazing talent. The guy's incredible. At this, he's incredible. And he came to Malaysia, and he put it on pole by a second or something, and you just couldn't understand how he could do certain things.
This is the last corner. This will be a magnificent Ferrari 1-2. Eddie Irvine wins the first Malaysian Grand Prix. Michael Schumacher is second. Maximum points for Ferrari. Irvine leads the World Championship. Ferrari lead the Constructors' Championship. And McLaren are not at all happy as Mika Häkkinen finishes third in the distance.
When he came back in Malaysia, did he come back in the spirit of cooperation, put an arm around you, I'm going to help you to the World Championship?
Well, listen, he didn't want to, and, you know, if I had been him, I wouldn't have wanted to either, you know. He was trying to miss the rest of the season for obvious reasons, because he didn't want me to win the first championship. Ferrari, you know, he was hired to do that job, so it made total sense. I wouldn't begrudge him them feelings. I had them exact same feelings, you know. So, but Montezemolo found out he was out playing football when he said he wasn't fit enough to race.
That is true, is it?
Oh, that's a true story, yeah.
Yeah.
So he had to come back because Montezemolo really lost it with him with that. And he did an amazing job for me in Malaysia, amazing job.
But could he do the job in Japan as well? Irvine needed to finish ahead of Häkkinen for the title. If Schumacher could get ahead of Häkkinen, that could do it as well. Another Formula One showdown in Japan.
Mika Häkkinen wins in Japan. He is world champion.
For Eddie Irvine, the shootout for the title in Japan was an anticlimax. Mika Häkkinen dominated the race to retain his driver's title by a 2-point margin from Irvine. Ferrari seemed pretty happy to settle for their first constructors' title in 16 years. But for Irvine, his big chance with the greatest name on the grid had gone.
It was the only opportunity I had. I never had a good car really in Formula One. The 99 car was an okay car. It wasn't a great car, because I remember Michael in 2000, like at the start of the season, he goes, dude, he says, this car is amazing compared to last year's car. And of course they went on and they won the championship easily. I never had a good car. If you don't have a good car, you can't win it unless you are Michael Schumacher or you are Ayrton Senna, you know. Lots of guys won in Adrian Newey's cars, big deal. You know, like Adrian's the real genius out there. You know, there's Senna, there's Michael, there's Newey. Of my era, they're the three great talents, because if you weren't Michael, you generally didn't win a world championship unless you were driving a Newey car. So,
has that become a weakness of Formula One as a...
I think it was always like that, to be honest. I think, you know, we didn't have the insight that we have now to see who was really good. Back in Jackie Stewart's day, you know, Jackie was obviously a very talented driver, but there's other guys out there that probably weren't that great. And they couldn't have been that great because you didn't have the catchment area. Like, the quality of footballers now is incredible because the money's there, the training's there. Every kid wants to be a footballer. You know, when the money came in and the sponsorship came in, all of a sudden you had a much bigger pool of talent. And a bigger pool of talent, you're going to get better talent. Yes. You know, could Jackie Stewart be 3 times world champion today? Maybe he could, because he was one of the really good guys. But I'm sure there was lots of guys back then that were pretty useless, but you know, they were in the right era to be useless and still get away with it. And you didn't have telemetry to show where guys were making up. Because one of the things that really was a detriment, or one of the big things that made the big names struggle more against young guys coming in, is the big names that have lots of experience at all the circuits. And then the young guy would come in and say, oh, I'm losing 3/10 at that corner, I'll work in that corner. back in the day, you didn't know where you were losing the 3/10, so you'd be working all over the place.
Sort of took
It
away
gave
the
a lot
driver's
of-
instinct a bit, didn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
and a lot of drivers could drive around their whole life and not figure out they were losing 2/10 in the slow corner. Like, I always killed Michael in slow corners, but he killed me in the fast corners.
You moved on from Ferrari to actually link up with Jackie Stewart and the Jaguar project. And did you go there with hopes that this was going to be a significant entrance into Formula One?
I did, actually. You know, they came in, it was perfect. You know, Jaguar, what a great name for Formula One. They had a good little team. They said they were going to have a big budget. Paul Stewart was a good guy. I was quite in shock when I got there how behind they were. They'd lucked into a good car, you know, the year before, and they'd had a couple of good results, and they had a very powerful engine. The Cosworth was a great engine. The drivability was not that great, but it was a great engine, a lot of power. But they really had no idea where the level was, and I was shocked. And you had no real boss who understood what was going on. I remember asking Paul, you know, who is the boss of this team? And Jackie went, Paul is, which answered it really, you know. But the biggest thing was they had no wind tunnel. They had a wind tunnel in LA, and they were flying the model out to LA, and the model that was in LA was not the same as the model it was a mess. And what was amazing was when you came from Ferrari, it showed me how good Jean Todt was, because the politics he had to deal with were 10 times the politics that the Ford Motor Company had, and he coped with it. Like, Jean Todt is a complete genius, he really is, and there was no one at that level in Jaguar, and it's such a shame because it was amazing. It was amazing for Formula One, it was amazing for Jaguar, but it all fell apart. Yeah. And they just tried new manager after new manager, and they just never got anyone of the right quality. And whoever came in didn't have the 100% backing of the whole organization. Yeah. But the actual people in the team were actually good. The mechanics were very good, and the guys, the whole team was good. It was just anyone that had a manager's badge was not good enough.
And if you follow the timeline through, I mean, you can see what could have been achieved. It eventually became Red Bull, and
well, it needed someone like Newey in there. Yeah. You know, to like Michael. We got Newey. It's our fault if it goes wrong. We got Michael. It's our fault if it goes wrong. And that they didn't have that. Yeah. You know, Ford didn't even know what Formula One was. Didn't care. Great idea. Horribly executed.
Yeah. So ultimately, was it a sport you were glad to get out of, turn your back on?
I was glad to get out of it, and I wasn't glad to get out of it. It was, you know, right, next. I was always doing other stuff anyway. I loved the Formula One that I was involved in, and I loved the Formula One that I watched as a kid. The Formula One of today, I don't really love it. I don't like the countries they're going to. Not from the country's point of view, I just don't like all these man-made circuits. You know, I prefer the raw places like here, like Spa, like the original Silverstone, the original Brands Hatch, Imola, you know, Monza. The circuits that if you see one photograph, you know where it is.
Yes.
And now it's too manufactured. And the button that lets you overtake everyone you want to overtake.
You'd have liked one of those, wouldn't you?
Well, I wouldn't have, because I normally qualified well and I made really good starts. So I was normally ahead of where I should have been on speed. So they all would have overtaken me. So actually I was in the right era and I didn't normally make a lot of mistakes. So I was in the best era for me. Now they'd all overtake me very easily.
So if you did come back and run a team with all the good things that you've learned, all the bad things you've experienced, and all the negative things that you've seen, what kind of team would it be?
It wouldn't interest me now. The sport's in a place where I'm not interested. I want Ferrari to do well because, you know, I have a lot of friends still at Ferrari. You know, Ferrari's, you know, I think Alonso does a fantastic job when he's on his own. Like he really didn't do himself any favors when Hamilton was his teammate. But when he's on his own with no teammate threatening him, he's amazing. So I like Ferrari a lot. As you know, Stefano Domenicali is still a great friend of mine. A lot of the guys that were there, actually, and that was my team. Like Stefano was kind of my guy. He ran my side of the team whenever Todd was running Michael's side of the team. So a lot of my guys are the bosses at Ferrari and that hire individuals there now. So I still have a very good affinity with that team, but I just don't really like the way Ferrari, the way Formula One went. I'm a traditionalist. You know, I think it should be hard to overtake. I think if there is no overtaking, that means it's really hard to overtake. And if there is an overtaking maneuver, it's amazing. I always go back to fishing. If, you know, I don't want to go and fish and catch 300 fish a day. I want to sit there all day and go, whack, there's a 300-pounder. You know, and now everybody's catching minnows. It's not exciting. Like Hamilton, when he first went to Formula One, was amazing to watch him overtake, because no one could overtake, and Hamilton was overtaking, so you knew that guy's amazing. He's doing an amazing job.
Yeah.
Now, you see an overtaking maneuver, you don't know whether it was the button he pushed, the guy in front. You just don't know what's going on. The tire. It's just, you know, it's too much. There's too many variables to show. It's too complicated for my little brain, maybe.
So for you, the Formula One at its best would be what sort of era? Senna, Prost?
Senna, Prost, that was the ultimate, 88.
Yeah.
And it was just the most insane series. There was only 2 guys that were ever going to win a race, and I think they won all the races except for one. That was just the 2 greatest things in Formula One at the highest level, driving each other to enormous levels of competitiveness. And for me, that's what I want to see. I don't want to see 7 winners, because that means there's 7 average guys out there, or there's something going on that doesn't make sense. I want to see the best against the best, and nothing else.
After Formula One, the racing stopped, but the lifestyle continued, including the island in the Bahamas and the millions made from property development of all kinds.
I do stuff in Ireland, which is just building normal houses, which I'm not really that interested in. You know, I do look and see what we're doing because my name's on it and I want it to be nice, but the stuff I do in Miami, and especially the island, Miami, I do stuff that I love, and I design them with my builder, and we do amazing houses that sell for, you know, really good money. But the island is something where the building regulations aren't as strict, and you have more freedom from the regulations, and you can do stuff that's really stunning, and that's
Lifestyle is still the priority.
Lifestyle's a priority. I love money, and I want money, but that's only so that I can live the life I want to live.
You're certainly doing that. Eddie, it's been great to talk to you.
Thank
Fascinating stories. Thanks very much indeed.